finally over after a recount and with a concession. Governor Rick Scott will soon become Senator Rick Scott, defeating incumbent Democrat Senator Bill Nelson. I'm John Scott, and this is the Fox Report. The recount came to an end today. It will be officially certified on Tuesday. Meantime, Nelson released a taped statement this afternoon conceding his Senate seat to Scott, who will join Marco Rubio as two Republican senators representing Florida. The first time that's happened in a century. Here is Nelson on his unsuccessful campaign.
I was not victorious in this race, but I still wish to strongly reaffirm the cause for which we fought. We may have been heavily outspent in this campaign, but we were never outworked. To all Floridians, whether you voted for me or for my opponent or that you didn't vote at all, I ask you to never give up this fight.
For more, we go to Phil Keating. He's live in West Palm Beach, Florida. Phil.
John, 12 long, hard-fought, and contentious days, and yes, it is all now finally over. One of the closest elections in Florida history, with 6 races that actually were so close they had to be recounted by machine. Here's another bit of Senator Nelson's concession, which he made on a pre-taped video interview or a video statement today, the first one he's ever done of his political career.
Worked out a little differently than Grace and I had hoped, but let me say I by no measure feel defeated, and that's because I've had the privilege of serving the people of Florida and our country for most of my life.
Republican Governor Rick Scott will now be headed to Washington. He released this statement 4 hours ago. Quote, "I just spoke with Senator Bill Nelson, who graciously conceded, and I thanked him for his years of public service. Now the campaign truly is behind us, and that's where we need to leave it." In the also close race for governor, which also went to a machine recount, Republican Ron DeSantis will be the state's next governor, beating Democratic Tallahassee Mayor Andrew Gillum. Gillum conceded last night.
Now that we are rounding that process out, RJ and I wanted to take a moment to congratulate Mr. DeSantis on becoming the next governor of the great state of Florida.
And Ron DeSantis tweeted, "This was a hard-fought campaign. Now it's time to bring Florida together." And it was so close in Florida, as I mentioned, 6 races had to be machine recounted. It was 8.2 million Floridians voted. And in the Senate race, Scott wins by just 10,000 votes. And in the governor's race, DeSantis wins by 32,000.
President Trump sitting down with Fox News Sunday host Chris Wallace for an interview covering an array of topics, including the death of Jamal Khashoggi, the Washington Post columnist murdered last month while inside the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. The CIA concludes the Saudi crown prince ordered the hit. Here's the president's reaction.
We have the tape. I don't want to hear the tape. No reason for me to hear the tape.
Why don't you want to hear it, sir?
Because it's a suffering tape. It's a terrible tape. I've been fully briefed on it. There's no reason for me to hear it. In fact, I said to the people, should I? They said, you really shouldn't. There's no reason. I know everything that went on the tape without having to.
Allison Barber is at the White House right now. Allison, does the president believe the CIA's assessment?
John, he told reporters in California that it is too early. He said he spoke with the CIA director, but when it comes to whether or not the crown prince is behind Khashoggi's murder, the president says the CIA has not assessed anything yet. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman denies any involvement. When pressed on what happens if the crown prince is lying, President Trump talked about Saudi Arabia as an ally.
He told me that he had nothing to do with it. He told me that, I would say, maybe 5 times. At different points.
But what if he's lying?
As recently as a few days ago.
Do you just live with it because you need him?
Well, will anybody really know? All right. Will anybody really know? But he did have certainly people that were reasonably close to him that were probably involved. You saw we put on very heavy sanctions, massive sanctions on a large group of people from Saudi Arabia. But at the same time, we do have an ally, and I want to stick with an ally that in many ways has been very good.
The CIA reportedly concluded that the Saudi crown prince ordered Khashoggi's murder. The State Department issued a statement that said in part, quote, recent reports indicating that the U.S. government has made a final conclusion are inaccurate. President Trump says there will be a full report on Khashoggi's murder, looking at the overall impact as well as who did it by Tuesday. John?
In the U.S., the Democrats had their biggest net gain of seats in the House since the 70s. Is the president worried about that?
He says that he's not. The president spent a significant amount of time campaigning for Republicans across the country, gubernatorial candidates, Senate candidates, House candidates. He told people more than once that they should vote Republican and encouraged them to look at their vote in the midterms as a vote for this administration, his administration, and his policies. But despite that, the president is now saying losses in the House are not a reflection on him or his chances in 2020.
I won the Senate, and that's historic too, because if you look at presidents in the White House, it's almost never happened where you won a seat. We now have 53 as opposed to 51.
But if you can't carry, and you certainly didn't carry it 2 weeks ago, Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, you're not going to get reelected.
I didn't run. I wasn't running. My name wasn't on the ballot. There are many people that think I don't like Congress that like me a lot.
As for 2020, we'll know if he's right in 2 years. John?
Allison Barber at the White House, thank you.
You bet.
During his exclusive Fox News interview, President Trump defending his choice of Matthew Whitaker as acting attorney general, as some lawmakers push back over Whitaker's criticism of the Russia investigation. Garrett Tenney has more.
President Trump said he didn't know about Matt Whitaker's past criticisms of the Mueller investigation before picking him as acting attorney general. And afterwards, when he did find out, the president said it didn't have any effect on his decision. He also told Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday he doesn't think Whitaker's past criticisms of the special counsel will have any impact on the investigation.
Well, he says there's no collusion. He says,
Chris, I'll tell you what.
Says you can starve the investigation.
He's right. What do you do when a person's right? There is no collusion. He happened to be right. I mean, he said it. So if he said there is collusion, I'm supposed to be taking somebody that says there is, because then I wouldn't take him for two reasons. But the number one reason is the fact that he would have been wrong. If he said that there's no collusion, he's right.
Democrats aren't buying that explanation, though. And on ABC's This Week, Congressman Adam Schiff said his party plans to challenge the constitutionality of Whitaker's appointment since he wasn't approved by the Senate, and said if Whitaker tries to do anything to curb the Mueller investigation, Congress will expose it and take action.
The biggest flaw, from my point of view, is that he was chosen for the purpose of interfering with the Mueller investigation. He auditioned for the part by going on TV and saying he could hobble the investigation. And ethically, he should have absolutely nothing to do with the investigation.
President Trump said his legal team is still going over his written answers to questions from the special counsel, but he expects that those will be submitted sometime this next week. John?
Garrett Tenney reporting. Garrett, thanks. On Twitter today, President Trump misspelling the last name of California Congressman Adam Schiff in a way that we don't want to pronounce on camera. The president referencing Schiff while tweeting about acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker and comparing his appointment to that of Robert Mueller as special counsel in the Russia investigation. Crews battling deadly fires raging up and down California. When might that state see some relief? A live report coming up. Plus, as thousands of migrants descend on a U.S. border town, we go live to Tijuana, Mexico, while lawmakers offer their ideas for addressing the situation.
The best thing we can do to help those people is build a wall where we need it, cut down any illegal immigration, because we are funding the corruption in Mexico. Stop anybody coming in illegally, and you won't have people crying on the borders because things will be going so well in Mexico.
Fox Nation. Plus, get limited time available exclusive merchandise and Fox Nation special access to events with your favorite personalities. Stories done right, politics done right.
Fox Nation, opinion done right.
Become a founder now.
Tensions running high as a wave of Central American migrants arrives in Tijuana, Mexico, facing an angry reception from the city's residents. About 3,000 migrants are now reportedly straining that city's shelter system. Here's former acting ICE director and Fox News contributor Tom Homan.
I certainly hate to see the violence, but maybe the Mexicans are getting fed up. I mean, they have a sovereign country too, and their border's been been broken. It's a crime to transit through Mexico without a transit visa. So maybe Mexico is finally standing up and saying, no, we have laws too, and you got to respect our laws.
William Lajeunesse is with the caravan. He's live from Tijuana, Mexico, with the very latest. William?
Well, John, we had dueling rallies today here in Tijuana, both for and against the migrant caravan. A major confrontation averted by this line of riot police here. But I will tell you, you can look over here, the debate continues right as we speak. Now, it began earlier today when local protesters like this woman opposing the caravan marched downtown. They were met by riot police. They tried to get to the migrant shelter. 30 minutes of physical violence, water bottles thrown, but no rocks. Now, it began with a rally at a monument here in Tijuana. Their point of view is this, basically. Number one, that these migrants entered illegally and violently at the Guatemala border. Number two, that they're going to take jobs and depress wages here in Tijuana. And finally, that they're going to bring crime, drugs, prostitution, and gangs.
You know of incidences here in Tijuana and in other cities that some of these people that are coming into with these caravans are committing crimes, and so we are protesting. I am protesting that we want the government to take control. We want them to stop them at the border and register them, check who they are, and then let them in once they register them.
A smaller counter demonstration about a mile away supporting the caravan and the LGBTQ community that is here in pretty big numbers. They ran the other way when these guys approached. They say the caravan represents a human tragedy and Tijuana should welcome and protect them.
They have to be more tolerant because there's a lot of people, a lot of Mexicans that go to the United States also.
Now, according to the Mexican government, right now there are about over 6,200 caravan migrants in town with another 3,000 on the way. Some of the shelters are overflowing, stressing the resources. We see people running for food just about an hour ago, begging for water earlier. Now, they can't let them into the United States right now, so a lot of these people feel stuck. Their asylum claims at least 5 weeks away, but they said they don't regret it, and many will stay here in Mexico.
I feel sad though, because we're not all like that. We're not all came inside to like violently or aggressive. We try to do it all like in peace.
So there's a stalemate going on basically right now with people not being able to get into the United States, finding themselves staying here for probably a long period of time, between 6 months and 18 months, according to the governor. And a lot of locals that you can see don't like that because they believe in Mexico first. John?
William Lajeunesse in Tijuana. Thank you. Included in that migrant caravan arriving seeking asylum in the U.S., 7 LGBT couples from Central America taking part this weekend in a symbolic group wedding. Organizers of the ceremony say the couples wanted to show their commitment to one another. After arriving in Tijuana, they joined the caravan to escape anti-gay attitudes in Central America, where LGBT couples face discrimination, assault, and even murder. The 2020 census could be a controversial one. The Trump administration wants to ask those surveyed if they're U.S. citizens or not. David Lee Miller explains the controversy.
You cannot know your country unless your country knows you.
Mandated by the Constitution, every 10 years the government is required to hold a national head count. As part of the 2020 census, the Trump administration wants to ask all people surveyed if they are a U.S. citizen. New York, joined by 16 other states, is fighting in court to keep the question off limits.
We feel that the Trump administration is trying to politicize the census.
Supporters of the citizenship question say American values are at stake.
It's about ideological warfare.
The lawsuit challenging the census says the citizenship question will scare immigrants from taking part. And as a consequence, certain areas could lose congressional seats and federal money.
The Trump administration is trying to restrict the rights of immigrants, and they're willing to go so far as to undermine the Constitution to get there. That's illegal, and that's why we filed this lawsuit.
An advocacy group that wants the citizenship question asked says the information gathered could be used to protect voting rights and accuses critics of unfairly charging racism.
This is what they do when they're running out of arguments, is they start to say it's all racist. And look, they're afraid that we're going to get a better handle on the problem of illegal immigration, because right now we have a pretty good census occurring but we don't have exact information. And I think that's what the plaintiffs are afraid of, because it runs against their broader agenda.
The judge is expected to render a decision in the case in about 2 weeks, but no matter what he decides, each side says it's likely this case will go to the U.S. Supreme Court. In New York, David Lee Miller, Fox News.
Democrat Stacey Abrams says she plans to run for elected office again after conceding the highly contested Georgia gubernatorial race to Republican Brian Kemp on Friday. Despite the concession, Abrams still upset with Kemp, who she believes blocked eligible voters from voter rolls.
It's death by 1,000 cuts. It's not sufficient to simply purge voters from the rolls for inactivity. He removed voters who were eligible. He also denied access to more than 3,000 new citizens who should have been added to the rolls, but he prevented them from being able to vote.
Abrams is not saying what office she might seek in the future. Kemp, a staunch supporter of President Trump, was officially elected Georgia governor today. Vice President Mike Pence speaking about relations with China.
Our conversations.
I'm John Scott, and this is the Fox Report. It's the bottom of the hour if you're just joining us. Wildfires raging in California causing at least 79 deaths. Some 1,300 people are still missing and more than 125,000 acres have burned. The hardest hit area in the northern part of the state, with the town of Paradise virtually destroyed by the Camp Fire. California Congressman Devin Nunes among those for whom the devastation is personal.
The Camp Fire hits close to home. I have a cousin that lived in Paradise, him and his wife. Their house is now gone. My uncle had to take a motorhome, a used motorhome, up to Chico, where you now see a lot of people camped out that are living in the town of Chico, which is not far from Paradise. So the tragic part about all of this is, Maria, that years ago we had timber mills all over this state. We used to go up into the forest and we used to take this wood out. And I think what American people need to know is that if you don't remove the wood and the brush, eventually it burns.
The dry conditions and powerful winds this past week have certainly made it tougher on firefighters. Joining us now with the forecast for the parts of California where those fires are still burning, Adam Klotz in the Fox Extreme Weather Center. Any relief in sight, Adam?
John, things are slowly beginning to improve, and in the next week or so, I think things will get even better. But it's still warm. It's still dry. As most of the country is dealing with winter, these are the temperatures you're experiencing, especially up and down the coast of California. Temperatures in the 70s once again, and the air has just been so dry, remains so. This is our satellite and radar from the last 6 hours, but I could take you back days and days, and they have not seen a whole lot of any sort of moisture moving all along the coast. It has been dry. Unfortunately, it's going to be dry for at least the next couple of days. The relative humidity, you start to see some of these browns and these orange colors. That's getting down to humidity down beneath 25%, which just means the air is really dry. Fires can spark very easily and they can spread very easily. Now, we'd gone through a couple of weeks where the winds were really strong. Those have begun to back down a little bit here. This is our forecasted wind gusts over the next little bit, and the colors start to pop up when you're seeing winds getting up to 20 to 30 miles an hour. We really don't have that. What you do have, and what's been the problem, a lot of these fires happening up in Northern California, there's not a lot of place for this smoke to go, so it's been a problem with the air quality settling down from Sacramento over towards the Bay Area, getting towards Oakland and San Francisco. We've got the Sierra Nevada mountains off towards the eastern side of the state. The coastal ranges, all of that smoke gets stuck and just sits in the air with nowhere to go, especially with these winds backing down a little bit. Trouble for people breathing, the elderly, the very young. This is going to be an issue the next couple of days until some rain can eventually move in, which will happen. We're getting closer and closer to the wet season, but they are well behind the state of California on their total rainfall for the year. Most of the state is at least in dry conditions, but you see some areas in Southern California and extreme Northern California where you're getting up to severe or extreme drought levels, spots getting down to as much as a foot beneath the typical rainfall they'd see. It's not going to be too much longer, John, until some rain does work its way in. Dry the rest of today, dry Monday and Tuesday. But as we get closer to the holidays, which isn't going to be great for travel, but Wednesday and Thursday, we're looking at a major system rolling off the Pacific. It is going to bring rain to Northern California. It's eventually going to bring rain to Southern California. That's going to be good for the air quality. Those particles just kind of hang in the air until the rain can knock them out. It's going to be good to help the firefighters wrap up some of those blazes that are still going.
And that will be cause for Thanksgiving.
Mm-hmm.
Adam Klotz. Yeah. Adam, thank you.
Wasn't a big deal. You know, they make it like I had meetings for many, many hours. I got the questions. I responded. We wrote them out. I read them once. I read them a second time. We made some changes. That's it.
Speaking on Fox News Sunday about answering written questions from Special Counsel Robert Mueller in the Russia investigation. Meantime, the president also talking about new acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker. Democrats oppose his appointment, noting he publicly criticized the Mueller probe and could decide how much of a possible Mueller report would go to Congress. Here's the president on what he expects from Whitaker.
If Whitaker decides in any way to limit or curtail the Mueller investigation, are you okay with that?
Look, it's going to be up to him. I think he's very well aware politically. I think he's astute politically. He's a very smart person, a very respected person. He's going to do what's right. I really believe he's going to do what's right.
But you won't overrule him if he decides to curtail.
I would not get involved.
Joining us now, Daniel Halper, contributing editor for the Free Beacon and the Weekly Standard. So the president's questions, the answers to the questions from Robert Mueller, expected to get to Mueller's office by Thanksgiving. This is high-stakes stuff, but the president seems pretty confident, Daniel.
Yeah, well, the president always seems confident no matter what, and that's his style, and perhaps he has reason to be. But I think the stakes are very high, and I think in some ways the presidency and his future and whether impeachment and whether Mueller can get him and whether Democrats come in, a lot of things will fall into place depending on how he answers these questions and whether or not they satisfy whatever it is that Robert Mueller is looking for, which of course seems to change day to day. So I think it's very important that he gets this right. And I'm sure I would speculate that he's taking it perhaps more seriously than he let on, where he just wrote it and read it once, I think he said in the interview.
Does the submission of his answers mean that this investigation is nearly over?
You would think so, right? Usually, we saw with Hillary Clinton, the investigation around Hillary Clinton, they did the entire investigation and then basically interviewed Hillary Clinton at the end. So normally in these sorts of investigations, even with the Bill Clinton investigation, that they try to interview or pose the questions to the people integral into these investigations at the end when they have all the facts. So you would think it's getting close, but it's, I think, been something like 77 weeks. It's been going on for a very long time. But I think it's got to be said, and probably isn't said enough, that President Trump and his legal team have a huge victory just by getting written questions themselves and not having to answer one-on-one or perhaps recorded questions. I think that's much more advantageous to the president to just be able to write them out beforehand and review them with his legal team. I think that seems to be a huge legal victory if it does indeed end right here.
It's my understanding that all of the questions predate or have to do with the time that predates the president's election, which raises the question, how much does it have to do with Russian collusion?
Well, I mean, we don't know what the questions are. Maybe we'll find out at some point. So I'm not sure what your sources are saying, but I would venture to guess that Robert Mueller isn't just looking at collusion. We've seen other things going on here behind the scenes where it seems to be he's broadened the investigation pretty dramatically. So that wouldn't surprise me necessarily, but I don't think that Robert Mueller is taking a very strict approach.
Let's take a listen to Congressman Adam Schiff, the Democrat from California. He is steamed that the president chose Matthew Whitaker to be acting attorney general, and he says in a Democratic-led Congress, they may try to undo that. Listen.
I think the appointment is unconstitutional. He's clearly a principal officer, and the fact that he is a temporary principal officer doesn't mean that that is any less subject to Senate confirmation. Constitutionally, it has to be subject to confirmation. I think they lose that case when it goes to the Supreme Court.
Do the Democrats have a prayer of getting Matthew Whitaker booted as acting attorney general?
I'm not sure about booted. He's got a limited amount of time. We'll see. There is legal arguments to be made, and perhaps that would work outside of Congress and through the courts. Look, the Democrats would be upset no matter who President Trump. When President Trump nominated Jeff Sessions to be Attorney General, Democrats were furious. And then they were furious when President Trump asked Jeff Sessions to resign, and Jeff Sessions finally resigned. So it doesn't matter what President Trump's going to do. The Democrats are going to be furious, and their job is going to be to obstruct him and to try to stop him and to try to slow him down at every turn. That's what opposition party does, and that's what they're going to do. And they're going to do everything they can to stop the guy. They've made that abundantly clear as long as we've had President Trump.
He's also getting blocked, not from the opposition. Jeff Flake, a Republican, outgoing senator from Arizona, is blocking the president's judicial nominees. Hard to see how that really gets him anywhere since he's going to be out of office come January.
Yeah, it does seem like he's, it's all for show. It's sort of him trying to show that he's standing up for principle. It's weird that he all of a sudden adopted this strategy now, but I guess he's suggesting that he is now all of a sudden afraid now that Whitaker himself has been put forward to be the acting attorney general. But President Trump, he's obviously right, as he says in this interview with Chris Wallace, that, what am I supposed to do? I nominate somebody who I don't agree with? Like, I agree. If he had said, Whitaker had said that there had been collusion, President Trump, are we supposed to believe that he's supposed to nominate somebody to be attorney general or to be acting attorney general if he doesn't agree with him and thinks that he's fundamentally wrong? So it's a strange, presidents are allowed to have and they're allowed to select people they want to serve in these positions.
Yeah.
And of course, senators have every right to, and anybody else has any right to speak out against it.
They can complain. Daniel Halpern,
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The president and Chris Wallace discussing much more in that exclusive interview. Here's an excerpt of their discussion on the president's relationship with the media.
I can't talk for other people. I can only talk for me. I will tell you.
But you're seen around the world as a beacon for repression, not for...
I'm not talking about you, but you sometimes maybe, but I'm not talking about you. The news about me is largely phony. It's false. Even sometimes they'll say, sources say. There is no source in many cases. In many cases there is.
I understand you don't like your coverage.
No.
Can I just bring the bigger...
94% negative.
That full interview is coming up at the top of the hour, right after this program. Fox News Sunday re-airs right after us, beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern, 21 minutes from now. Economic cooperation fails to reach a formal joint closing statement amid disagreements between the U.S. and China over trade and security. Vice President Pence tweeting just an hour ago, every nation gathered here at APEC has a place in President Trump's vision for a free and open Indo-Pacific. Our vision excludes no one. We only ask that nations respect their neighbors' sovereignty, embrace free, fair, and reciprocal trade, and uphold individual rights. Trey Yingst has more from Jerusalem.
John, normally on the last day of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit, leaders present a written declaration of agreed-upon ideas. But this year, amid tension between China and the United States, the conference ended without consensus. According to reports, the issue of the World Trade Organization was a major sticking point. Vice President Mike Pence, on behalf of the United States, argued that leaders should denounce the organization and call for its reform. Prime Minister Peter O'Neill of Papua New Guinea, where the event was held, pushed back against that idea, saying it was an issue that should be addressed at the World Trade Organization. This as Pence and Chinese President Xi Jinping exchanged jabs in remarks Saturday, with Xi Jinping criticizing the Trump administration's America First policies, and Pence saying, quote, the U.S. will not change course until China changes its ways. The vice president referring to the $250 billion worth of tariffs levied by the U.S. against Chinese goods earlier this year. Pence reiterating the U.S. position that President Trump believes America has been routinely taken advantage of by China. Take a listen.
We have great respect for President Xi and great respect for China. But, in the president's words, China's taken advantage of the United States for many, many years. And those days are over.
Now, President Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping are scheduled to meet on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Argentina later this month. The event could lead to solutions in a growing trade war between China and the United States. John?
Trey Yingst reporting. Thanks, Trey. The U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops was going to vote on proposals addressing sexual abuse when the Vatican said hold off. Why and what happened next? Still ahead. But first, a Utah community says goodbye to its mayor, a war hero killed in Afghanistan. Mourners remembering 39-year-old Brent Taylor.
Just seeing that flag and the flag in the canyon, it just shows the love that we have for those that have served and for Mayor Taylor.
Mayor who was killed while serving as a member of the National Guard in Afghanistan laid to rest today. Funeral services held for 39-year-old Brent Taylor in North Ogden. Aaron Cox from our Fox affiliate in Utah has the story.
It makes me proud to be a part of this community.
You didn't have to know Major Brent Taylor to be in the crowd lining the streets for his procession on Saturday.
We're just here to support him and his family. I'm just very grateful and in debt to him and all of the troops that have served.
A community surrounding the streets.
Just seeing that flag and the canyon, it just shows the love that we have for those that have served and for Mayor Taylor.
And decorating the cemetery where Taylor's friends and family surrounded his gravesite. His fellow soldiers brought Taylor home for the last time. The emotions too raw to hide.
No greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends.
The flag draped over Taylor, folding the layers of his life, finishing his legacy presented to his wife, Jenny. Silence and tears as 7 more flags were presented to each of Taylor's 7 kids, the youngest just weeks away from her first birthday.
This plot of land as the final resting place for the physical and mortal body of Brent Russell Taylor.
Offering a prayer over his resting place.
We pray especially for Jenny and the children.
And for those left here without their father, husband, friend, mayor, and fellow soldier.
We have learned through Brent that there is goodness in the world. We desire to emulate this goodness.
Flowers, hugs, and kisses goodbye to Major Taylor, the one who paid the ultimate sacrifice, who gave all for the price of freedom.
We are grateful for the lesson that we have learned from him of the power of one individual. How one individual can truly impact and change the world.
Aaron Cox reporting. Thank you. The community has come together to support the Taylor family with meals on a weekly and monthly basis and a GoFundMe page set up to help with their expenses. We'll be back in a moment. Day of the Poor, the pontiff inviting nearly 6,000 underprivileged people to Mass in St. Peter's Basilica. More than 1,000 had lunch with him afterward today. He also sent out a special prayer to the U.S. for those impacted by the California wildfires and people dealing with freezing weather on the East Coast. Meantime, the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops was about to vote on proposals addressing sexual abuse, but the Vatican asked them to delay it. Lauren Green explains what happened next.
Bishops are vicars of Christ. We are not branch managers of the Vatican.
It was frustration born of an abrupt change of plans at the Catholic Bishops' biannual meeting in Baltimore this week. The Vatican at the last minute inserted its own authority as the bishops look to take decisive action on the sexual abuse crisis. Many believe Pope Francis himself directed the bishops not to decide on 2 crucial measures. One regarding a new code of conduct for bishops, and the other the creation of a civilian-led body to investigate those same high-ranking clergy who cover up abuse or are abusers themselves. The delay angering victims and the message it sends.
What they are telling Catholics and the American public is basically, we care more about our organization and our princely titles and positions than we care about children. Since the bishops' last meeting in the spring, they have witnessed the fall from grace of ex-Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, forced to resign and withdraw from ministry after a long history of abusing seminarians and at least 1 minor. Then came the bombshell Pennsylvania grand jury report, uncovering 300 abusive priests and more than 1,000 victims over 7 decades. Now at least 14 states have opened their own investigations. The bishop's chief concern, getting at the root of the problem.
I think that the ultimate failure we had was a failure to live the gospel, to live according to the morality that Jesus promotes for us, and bishops failed to do that.
The Vatican didn't give a specific reason for directing American bishops to stand down on any decisive vote. One expert speculated that because the abuse crisis is a global problem, the Vatican wants to set global standards when Pope Francis meets with them in February. In Baltimore, Lauren Green, Fox News.
Christmas coming early in Vermont as a mystery man becomes Santa Claus and gives shoppers the chance to buy gifts for the holidays. That story next.